Hello, Johnny Young there in Perth. It's nice to talk with you.
And with you too, Nick. In the first few years that I was recording, the very first early recordings that I made, and you wouldn't have these, I recorded at 6PR, a radio station in Perth. You've got to take your time to get what you want. It was sort of blues-orientated kind of song. And we recorded 4 tracks, and we still have them. They just recorded it direct to acetate. And it's wonderful to hear those really early recordings because it was really the way that we played at dances. It's what attracted the young people to us in the first place, that we were a little bit left of centre with our music. Of course, later on, people got to know me from Young Talent Time, and they formed the conclusion that I was a bit square. But in my early part of my singing career, it was very much the blues and John Lee Hooker, Lightning Hopkins, and of course the great early tracks from Ray Charles and Little Richard. We used to do What Did I Say and those sorts of tracks as well. So those recordings are still around. And the very first recording that I made, it had Come On Everybody, the Eddie Cochran song, and a few others that were recorded in some basement somewhere with a really crazy audio nut who was making recordings at his home. And we went there and it sounded terrific. And I've still got that too, so I'll send that to you, Nick, so you can add it to your collection. When we first started, my first band that I was performing with professionally, which was the Nomads, we used to play on Friday nights at the Fremantle Police Boys Club. That was 1961. So if you can imagine, there's no way in 1961 would we have been listening to songs from 1910. Terrific thing now, 50 years on, we can listen to the music that we recorded back in the early 1960s, and that's 50 years ago. So technology has really helped us keep a track and to continue to enjoy the songs that were there when we started. It was all mono, of course. The only recording that was done was for radio serials, and all of the radio serials were cut onto discs. And that started in the 40s, I think, or maybe even earlier than that. So we've had the ability to record stuff for a long time. Since Mr. Edison invented... Can you remember, Nick, now here's a quiz question for you. Can you remember the very first song that was ever recorded?
Was it Mary Had a Little Lamb?
Mary Had a Little Lamb, exactly. So the very first recordings that were actually made was music.
Getting back to that Come On Everybody you recorded, so what did you record it on? Was it a recording studio?
No, it was a basement, and the guy had a tape recorder, and we recorded it onto the tape recording with a couple of microphones in his basement, and then he got it cut onto a real thick acetate. Later, of course, you got vinyl, but the acetate recording was really fat and thick, and you could only cut it once. Reminds me of a funny story, Nick, that you'll like. I got a gold record for my first album that I released called Young Johnny, and I undid it and took the gold record off and put it on the record player to play to see if it was actually my record, and it wasn't. It was a Slim Dusty record.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What, did it have your name on it?
Yeah, it had my name. It had my label on it, but the actual recording itself, because, you know, it's made out of metal, the gold record, I could play it. I think they used the masters that they pressed off for making the gold records. So I put it on the record player and it played a Slim Dusty song. I thought that was kind of funny.
What, did they just spray paint it with gold paint, did they?
Yeah, spray painted it with gold paint, yeah.
Well, John, congratulations on that Young Johnny gold record there.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky. Step Back and Carolyn were my first nationally released songs. Actually, they were the first nationally released songs on the Clarion label. I was the first artist on that label, and it was recorded in Martin Clark's recording studio in Perth. And it was a fantastic recording session. Step Back went to #1, got a gold record for that, and then they turned it over and started to play Carolyn, and everybody thought that that was my new record, but it was the B-side. So it became a double-sided hit. Then Martin released Step Back and Carolyn, Baby You've Got What It Takes, and Let It Be Me, that's right, on a 4-track extended play, that's what it was called, an EP. It had 4 tracks on it, but 2 of the tracks were Step Back and Carolyn. That was the 3rd time that Step Back and Carolyn was being bought by the kids in another form, because it was Let It Be Me that was on the charts from that EP as well. And then I released the Young Johnny album, and that had Step Back and Carolyn on it as well, so, and that went to a gold record. So that was the 4th time that Step Back and Carolyn was being sold. It was incredible. Step Back was written by Stevie Wright and George Young.
And we're going to play the demo that you were speaking about on the last show.
Oh, did you find it?
Yes, we've got the demo. I think it's Stevie and George there singing in the background as well.
Yeah, and you can hear it was recorded at 8 o'clock in the morning with about half a dozen fans that were spread around their room, and Stevie had only just written the lyrics, but you can hear, when you listen to this, you can actually hear that it was a hit in the making, because it has such a commercial feel. And the thing that really made it, as Barry Gibb said to me once, it's not always the lyrics, it's often the musical hook that can be the thing that attracts people to the record, because you listen to Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison, da-da-da-da-da, and as soon as you hear that guitar riff, you know that it's Pretty Woman. That's the hook on that song. And Step Back, when George Young wrote it, it's that da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, that wonderful sort of chunky rhythm that George played. Anyway, I did an interview for a television program many years later with Stevie for a show called When Rock Was Young that I did for Channel 9. I asked him why they wouldn't write me a follow-up song to Step Back, because they'd written Step Back for me and I wanted them to write a follow-up song for it, and I could never get an answer from them. And Stevie told me in this interview that I did for the television program that the reason was they had, I think it was Woman, their song, which only got to number 3 because Johnny Young's Step Back, which was also written by them, was at number 1.
George Young could do no wrong, because your Step Back song, according to all the internet sites that I've been to, in the whole entire 1960s, it was only outsold by one man, and that was that horrible Normie Rowe that you're performing with.
Yeah. Well, you know, Normie's a mate, and I don't mind that, because I used to tour with Normie, and he was always the headliner. He was always on last, and performing before Normie had come on was a hell of a task, because the kids were just crazy about Normie. He was the king of pop. He was terrific, but he was always very generous to me, and we've remained friends for the last 50 years, and we're still friends, and we still work together. It's just fantastic when we get together, and still Normie is the headliner.
John, you've been complaining about that since you recorded Just Another Rock and Roller.
You're not as good as Normie Rowe. Yeah, that's one of the lines in that song.
John, I would say not many people know this, but you were actually born in Rotterdam, Holland.
Yes, I was. I'm one of those 10-pound migrants that came out here to Australia, and, well, you know, I was only a baby, but I'm an Aussie through and through. I went to school in Perth. I went to Subi State School and Perth Modern School, and all of my childhood was in WA until 1965 when I recorded those 2 songs we were talking about, Step Back and Carol, and that brought me over east. I'm very proud to say that, like most of Australians, or white Australians anyway, I came from Europe on the Margaret program of the time in the very early 50s. Proudly stood at the side of the road with my little flag in my hand when the new Queen Elizabeth, and she was absolutely stunning, came out here in 1954, and I felt so proud to be an Australian, as I still am, of course. Australia has offered me opportunities that I would never have been able to get over there. That's the beauty of Australia.
And George Young got the opportunity too, because he wasn't born here either, was he?
No, exactly. And another
Stevie.
Dutch migrant in the Easy Beats, Dick Diamond.
And Harry Vander.
And Harry Vander. There must be something about the Dutch blood that works in rock and roll. Let me tell you something about the Dutch and Australian. I've just finished reading a book called The Batavia, and the very first houses that were built by Europeans on Australian soil in 1639 were Dutchmen of the Batavia. I think Australia was called New Holland for a while too.
Speaking of early Australia, back to the early 60s, even then though, John, music was still a very competitive industry. So how did you get your breakthrough?
Oh, well, very simple. I wanted to be a singer. I'd sung on the radio as a 10-year-old on a show called Rumpus Room, which was a Saturday morning children's program, and the song I sang was Sugar Time. Sugar in the morning, sugar in the evening, sugar at the supper time, be my little sugar and love me all the time. That's when I was 10. That was my first performance in public on the radio. And then by the time I got to about 12 or 13, I started to sing at dances around Perth, just getting up with the band and singing Hippie Hippie Shake or Blue Suede Shoes or one of those songs. And they'd let me get up and sing 1 or 2 songs because they could see my enthusiasm, and I loved my rock and roll and I looked good. So they gave me an opportunity to perform. I didn't get paid, of course. And then one Wednesday night, I was at the Fiesta Stomp down near the beach here in Scarborough. Don Pryor, who was the bass player with the band called the Nomads, came up to me and said, could you learn 20 25 songs by Friday night. We've got a gig at the Fremantle Police Boys Club, and Jimmy Muscata, our lead singer, has had a car accident and he's in hospital and he can't sing. And I've seen you perform and I reckon you could cut it. So if you can learn 25 songs by Friday night, you got the gig. I was a ladies' hairdresser apprentice at the time. That's what I was doing during the day. And I was only 14. But I left school when I was that age and started the apprenticeship at Sam Rafisi's. I went on the Friday night to the dance at the Fremantle Police Boys Club, and all of the songs I knew anyway. Songs like Summertime Blues, Come On Everybody, all of the Cliff Richard hits, bit of Elvis, Tutti Frutti, and all the Little Richard songs. And I knew every one of them, so I didn't have to learn anything because I knew the words to all those songs anyway, and I knew how they were structured. So I got up and sang on the Friday night, got paid £3.10, which was a lot of money because I was only earning £2.7 and 6 for the whole week as an apprentice hairdresser. And it's funny remembering all this stuff. And I was asked by Sam Rafisi, who was training me as a hairdresser, do you really want to be in show business? Because you can't do both. You can't come here on a Saturday morning after having 2 or 3 hours sleep, because by the time we'd finish the gig in Fremantle, it'd be midnight, and then we'd go down the beach with a few girls and the guitars and sit on the beach and play music till about 3 or 4 in the morning. And then I'd go home, have a shower, and hop into my clothes and have to go directly to work. So I had to make a decision, and so I did. I made the decision to become a professional entertainer there and then, and I never stopped. From the moment I was 14, I was singing with bands, first of all with the Nomads, then with Johnny and the Strangers. That became Johnny Young and Company, and then on from there. I was lucky right from the beginning. But I think the secret to my success, if you will, is that I loved it so much. I really enjoyed it. I loved getting up and singing with a really good band, and I've always had good bands. It's not about the money, really, because I've had times in my rock and roll career when I've made a lot of money, and I've had times when I didn't make any. I always tried to do other things as well. I've always worked on radio right from the 60s. I love the radio medium as well. I love radio stations that play a lot of great music. I'm not that into talk radio all that much, even though I have done quite a bit of it. I prefer to work on music radio.
We better stop talking then.
Yeah.
One of those low periods is when you went to England.
Oh, no, that wasn't a low period. No, that was the high point. You can never fight the circumstances that exist. And the Bee Gees backed me on the record that I recorded in London for Polydor, which was Crace Finton Kirk, which they'd written, and they did the backing for me, and it was a terrific record. And it was climbing up the charts with the support of the pirate radio stations. The English government changed the law and closed down all the radio stations. That was an unfortunate circumstance. My record would have made the top 10, I feel confident, had they been allowed to continue supporting it. But the most important thing that I was learning in London was songwriting. Barry Gibb, who's always been incredibly generous to me right throughout my entire career, he actually presented me with my Go Set Songwriter of the Year award in 1970, which was a real buzz for me, because it was Barry who had taught me the rudiments of writing songs. And so when I came back from England, full of Barry Gibb inspiration, that's when I started songwriting. And that's where I had the series of 5 number-1 hit songs that I wrote for various people, as you know. I wrote The Real Thing for Russell Morris, and then a completely different song in The Girl That I Love, which was the follow-up hit record for Russell. And then Here Comes the Star for Ross D. Wiley, and Smiley for Ronnie Burns, and I Thank You for Lionel Rose. And they were all gold records, all in the space of a couple of years. So I can't in any way say that going to England was a time of failure for me. The opposite. Yes. It was a time of inspiration.
Don't forget Mike Walsh's Little One.
Yeah, well, I did a few of those. I did a few of those. Mike Walsh was a mate, was a terrific television man, and he wanted to make a record. So that was a very funny experience, I have to tell you. Look, not every song that I wrote was a gold record, but to have 5 gold records in a row was pretty good going.
I'd just like to mention also, you do a great version of The Girl That I Love. I must say, I love those swirly strings on your version.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was going to be Russell's first song before I wrote The Real Thing. And when Molly heard The Real Thing, he said, no, that's the song I want. I reluctantly gave it to him because I didn't think it was right for Russell. And then after we did The Real Thing, was completely a Molly Meldrum monster. It was enormous. Russell was saying how he wanted to get back to basics. He wanted to record a really simple guitar and voice only version of The Girl That I Love. He didn't even want the strings on it. When we recorded The Girl That I Love, and that's why perhaps you're not as impressed with Russell's vocal as what the fans were, because Molly just didn't think the song was going to be a number one hit. So he didn't even spend any time mixing it. I did the mix on The Girl That I Love in the end. I wasn't all that happy with Russell's vocal either. But because the people had been overdosed on The Real Thing, they didn't want The Real Thing Part 3 into Paper Walls. Too much in the genre of The Real Thing, so the radio stations decided to flip it over and play The Girl That I Love. And, yep, absolutely right. It went straight to number one and was the second gold record for Russell.
Exactly.
So that was terrific.
John, I want to talk about getting back to yourself. I mean, you had some great production too, because I love the production, and I'm pretty sure it's a Barry Gibb song or a Gibb Brothers song. It's I Am the World. And that's beautifully, lashly produced.
Yeah. That was in London, the Advision Studios, and it had the full orchestra. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Great, isn't it? When we were recording it, we loved it too. It was just up full bore when we played it back after we'd finished the mixing. And yeah, brilliant. We had some beautiful players on it too. Yeah, it was a wonderful song and beautiful, lush production. Yeah, thank you. Very proud of that record.
Well, you should be.
I still love hearing it. That album that you spoke about, the Virgo album for Ronnie Burns, was a wonderful experience. I used people like John Farrar to do arrangements. It was a wonderfully produced album. It was a really interesting album and time of terrific exploration for me and for Ronnie.
We had Ronnie on the show, and I think this is one of the best Australian albums ever. This is such a masterpiece, and I just got to mention that you wrote or had a hand in writing all of the songs and the arrangements by John Farrar and Peter Jones, and you're credited yourself as well, so you got to take a bit of credit there too.
Well, I did. I was right into it. Ronnie was a mate, and Maggie had been a friend since she was a dancer on Commotion. The very first time I came over from Perth to perform on Commotion to publicise my recording, no one had seen me before except those who had visited Perth and had appeared on my television show over there. I went straight into the Commotion studio, up on a rostrum, and Maggie Burns was dancing around me. That's Ronnie's wife, but she wasn't then. Then, of course, she became the choreographer of Young Talent Time for 12 years. So our love for each other and our relationship has continued on and on and on. I was speaking to Brian Cadd, I may have told you this, and Caddy said something which really rang so true to me, that those of us who were teenagers in the 60s were completely blessed. It was a wonderful time to be a teenager, and especially a wonderful time to be a teenage performer, because we had freedoms that had never been there before. The Australian entertainment industry was pretty square before the 60s. It was just a great time for the development of music here in Australia.
Well, Johnny, one song I want to ask you about, because I love this song, and as I mentioned, I love the album, and it reminds me of My Sweet Lord because of the Hare Krishna thing, but it's a great song. So where did the inspiration come for that, John?
Well,
The Prophet.
Ronnie and I...
You weren't speaking about yourself, were you, John?
Well, yes, in a way, because Ronnie and I were exploring all sorts of things, because John Lennon did Primal Therapy, and Ronnie and I did Primal Therapy as well, which is the screaming thing, you know, where you just scream and scream and scream and get it all off your chest. Fascinating stuff. And of course, the Beatles at that time, or just before that, had their huge Maharishi Mahesh Yogi stuff, and George was going down that path as he did for most of his life after that. So we took an interest, and I actually found a guru myself and started meditating, and it's been a plus in my life. Definitely been a fantastic aspect of my life to be able to find some peace on the inside in what is really basically often a crazy world. Yeah. That's where that came from. I don't think we quite pulled it off, but I don't mind it.
I like it. The public like it,
It was a great band track. That was Mark Kennedy and Barry Sullivan on bass, Mark Kennedy on drums, and it just rocks as a band track. We got a little bit carried away with all the vocals, but we enjoyed doing it. We had fun. It was just expressions of everything that we were experiencing at the time. The one song that I really relate to, because I've had some lonely moments in my life, as I'm sure every one of your listeners has had, and you have had too, and there's a song there, Jesus, I'm lonely, empty and aching, I don't know why, maybe it's the winter's cold, you know, that song, and I think it's called Jesus, I'm Lonely. And it was just a very, very intimate song. And we talked about whether we should include it on the album because it was so personal and so intimate a song. But we took the chance and put it on there. It was beautiful. And as you said, Peter Jones, another, like John Farrar, another one of those brilliant musicians that came out of the 60s, a wonderful pianist, eclectic, different, but the arrangements that he wrote were just fabulous. The string parts, I could hear them in my head, and Peter was able to translate it. He was one of those people, just a nice sustained string part over the top of that, but really pitch it very high, so it's sort of almost there like the wind. And he'd get it and he'd write it, and that's not easy to do because the voicing of violin parts for a recording is probably the most difficult part. It takes genius. If you're going to use strings, use them for emotion in a song, but you've got to have an arranger who can voice it right, and Peter Jones was one of those guys.
The string parts were a real highlight of the album. I mean, like many parts of the album, they just really, really, not just Jesus or The Prophet, all the tracks that use strings, Easy Rider's another one, they make the song hum along as well.
Yeah, and how lucky were we to have the opportunity to do that.
Doesn't sound like a cheap record, John.
Oh, it wasn't. It wasn't a cheap record.
Yeah.
Smiley, I was told by Spin Records, who Ronnie recorded for Spin, that I had $1,500 to record 4 tracks. And we did it. We ran a little over, and that included Smiley. Smiley and the B-side, I can't remember what the B-side was from Smiley. You'd probably know.
Jody.
Oh, okay. I can't remember that.
Jody, that was one of yours too, John.
And if you look at when the record company first listened to the unmixed version of The Real Thing, they nearly went crazy. They thought it was just a heap of rubbish because only Molly knew in his head what he wanted to hear ultimately with the record. Actually, my wife and I were driving along the road the other day and The Real Thing came on and we turned it up really loud. It gets played on the radio stations so often. I know you play it a lot and your listeners love everything Russell. We were listening, we had it up loud, and when you listen to it loud, you hear those subtleties. I've heard Russell sing it solo just with the guitar, and I guess that's the measure of a good song, is if you can sing it just with the guitar and still have impact. I'm very proud of The Real Thing.
John, look, we're running out of time. I just want to mention that on February the 4th...
We were just getting going.
I know.
So you get me out of bed after a 5-hour plane
Yeah, I know.
trip.
Sorry about that. February the 14th, which is Valentine's Day, and February the 15th, which is this Friday and Saturday, at the Palms, the Crown Casino. Johnny Young, Colleen Hewitt and Normie Rowe will be performing. And you've got a special guest, I think?
A special guest, one of the people who I wrote a number 1 hit, a host of a television, going to make a surprise, but don't tell anybody.
It's going to be Mike Walsh, isn't it?
Mike Walsh, yeah. Mate, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We could ramble on forever. I'm sure we'll do it again soon. Thank you for your continued support of everything Australian.
No worries, John. So your special guest will be on for both nights?
Yeah.
Good, because I think we might have had him on the show.
He's a mighty guy too, great singer.
He's a great singer.
He had a couple of huge hits, including that one I wrote for him.
He told us that story that you were, to coin a phrase, you were piss-farting around in the studio there, and he comes up to you. You can do something with your time. You can write me a song. And you said something like, "Okay, you star." Is that the right story?
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. But I reminded Ross the other day that the middle part, which I think is a really clever hook if you listen to the song, the middle part where it goes, "Now the stage is bare, knowing you're not there. I'd give it all away just to hear you say, I love you." That middle part was written in this person's house, standing at his fireplace. I can still see myself doing it. I was talking to him and he was insisting. He said, no, you wrote it all in the dentist chair at the production office where I told you to do something useful, and all of that's true. But I reminded him that the central part of the song, that middle part, that middle hook before the final choruses, was written in his lounge room at the fireplace.
Thanks.
Nice to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.